know you're clinging to the light of day, to tell you everything's a-okay. And medication don't do much, yeah, it just numbs the brain. Guess you might say I'm a little intense. I'm on the bright side of being hell-bent. So, take it from me, you're not the only one who can't see straight. If you were ever in doubt, don't sell yourself short. You might be bulletproof. Hard to move mountains when you're paralyzed, but you gotta try. And I'm calling out, get up, get up, get up, move on. Get up, what's taking so long? Get up, move on. Stop stalling, I'm calling out. Get up, move on. Get up, ain't nothing wrong. So I believe you can be whatever. And I agree you can do much better. Trust me. Everybody wants to sing their song. So Marvin Gaye, what's going on? Ain't nothing normal when it comes to you and me. I'd rather twist myself in knots than watch you give up on your dreams. If you were ever in doubt, don't sell yourself short. You might be bulletproof. Hard to move mountains when you're paralyzed, but you gotta try. So I'm calling out, get up, move on. Get up, what's taking so long? Get up, move on. Stop stalling, I'm calling out. Get up, move on. Get up, ain't nothing wrong. So I believe you can be whatever. And I agree you can do much better. Trust me.
Yeah, I don't know why I never talk about it. I guess that's probably part of the problem. Yeah, sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right. I'm just gonna keep moving. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep moving. Today, tomorrow, and the next.
Get up, move on. Get up, what's taking so long? Get up, move on. Stop stalling, I'm calling out. Get up, move on. Get up, ain't nothing wrong. So I believe you can be whatever. And I agree you can do much better. Trust me.
Okay, going live here. I've got my boom down from my microphone on my headset. I'm seeing, looks like good audio levels. Behind me, I have the IBM PS2 model 65SX. It is the third and last system that PS2 that I got from Edgar Digital in Las Cruces, New Mexico a few weeks back. I've already covered the Model 60 and the Model 80, both in towers like this. And I was about to say that they were a little bit more dirty than this one. This one was a little bit more clean, but you can see this, the other side than the panel, the open panel that we'll go through and open up in just a moment to show. And to see how that looks on the side. That doesn't look very clean. And greens to everyone coming on. And so I've got at least a couple viewers is what YouTube is showing me right now. Looks good on my stream out. It's about 4 megabit per second of upload. My CPU is below 75%. Actually looks like it's going down around 60%. We're in the low 60s. Hard drive's doing okay. Memory's steady. There's nothing. Good morning, John. And so everything's good audio level wise. Everybody's able to hear me. Looks like camera angles are adjusted pretty good. And I've got enough parts and pieces standing by here. I don't know. The three systems and the Model 60 and the Model 80 had it mainly on top. It looks like something that is dripped down over the units. I don't know what was if all three were at the same level or if they were stacked. I found them roughly together at the sitting on the ground, and there may have been something up above that just went through and liquefied in the hot New Mexico sun. These had set out, had been outside, and most all of them are the horizontal surfaces. We'll take a look inside in just a moment. And I've had the side panel off of this. In fact, these side panels, when you if they're not locked in, you lift the handle and the side panel typically just pops off. So hopefully that answered that question of where that, or as far as I know, where that black stuff came from. I don't know. It does actually look like, and I'm taking myself off the internal webcam, looks like the front panel. We've got just a little boo-boo there on the front panel. I've got my nickel that I just pulled out of my pocket to look at things. And so the badging, and I can probably go through and hold this up. Now, of course, initially there was the PS2 Model 60, which is a 286 10 megahertz, and that was the complementing tower to the desktop Model 50, the 85 50021, which had the 20 megabyte MFM hard drive. And of course, the Model 60 initially came out with an MFM drive. Later on, ESDI drives. There were some submodels of that. I've covered those in the Model 60. And then the Model 80 was delayed, of course, from the initial release in April of 1987. Came out some months later, a few months later, which was the Model 80 was based on the 386DX CPU. Started out at 16 megahertz, and they had some models up from there. The last unit that we covered last weekend was the Model 80 AXX. So that was the 386DX, 25 megahertz. And the model, and I just did a video on the system information tool running on that Model 80 last night. That video dropped. That's the last video on the channel. It'd been a while since I've run the system information tool on a system and look that over when you get a chance. Nothing really that was stood out or anything like that. Now, the weekend before, I did the Model 60, and I still have to clean up the systems a little bit more. I've got the Model 80 sitting outside. I've got to wipe down a little bit more of the top. The Model 60, I went through and I cleaned the top and started with the Clorox pads. I've got those still around. Now, this black stuff, if it is the foam, isopropyl alcohol or denatured alcohol cuts through the stuff. It is a little bit tacky to the touch here. I'll go through and I'll do a roundabout view of this. Now, the 65SX came out later on, of course. It is the tower complement to what is viewed as, or what I've heard as, the most heavily produced PS2 model was the 55SX. The 55SX is an interesting model in its own. You can almost see the evolution of the system as it goes along. And we'll see a little bit of that later on. I'll show the system. I've had videos prior to this of the 55SX. And we can cover it again. Now, when the 8565, the small 65SX came out, it is just a 386SX CPU at 16 megahertz. Nothing really fantastic. And this is in, I think it was, I'll have to look for the announcements. I did do a link earlier to the announcement. I can go through and I can put it. Hi, Hugh. And hi, other John Sab. So I've got some viewers picking up as I go through and get an intro into this. I did provide the link earlier to the 65SX. But I can even go through. I didn't have, and so I'm doing just like I always do. I'm kind of going in where, and this is just my little way of doing things, where I just bring the system in without really having done too much work on it or anything else. We're going to encounter what we encounter, warts and all. I don't go through and I don't, the production level's low here. So we just bring the system out, and I've done some preliminary stuff. I've already gone through a little bit of the evaluation of the system, as we'll see. So just to show, this is the 386SX. Okay. And so there's the planar diagram. Now for the announcement letters, it's got the link there. If I go through and pull it up though, I have a worry of, I'll have to see, can I get back? I want to see the announcement letter on when exactly. Yeah, I have a back button to this. So it's saying the announcement and initial price of the 8565-061 is $5,295, and that is in. I may have to put on my reading glasses. People can look at the announcement letter and the link there. That 190-052 is the announcement letter from IBM. Okay. And I get a correction here too. It's saying that VGA graphics. I apologize for kind of going in and out of view or looking in different areas. So let's read the announcement. The Personal System 2 Model 65SX, and it was two submodels, two new microchannel architecture models based on the popular Intel 80386SX processor, utilize the 80386SX processor running at 16 megahertz. So that's pretty. March the 20th of 1990. 1990. I mean, we're talking about the the 46 CPU came out in 1989 initially. Take a couple years or a few years to kind of gather steam. But we're talking about the 386DX CPU was out in levels. IBM had the Model 80, the AXX model that we looked at, 25 megahertz, with the cache on the motherboard and everything else. So very good systems. I mean, much higher cost, of course. But that's in $1990, which is effectively, I'd have to look at an inflation calculator, but the 8565-061 was $5,295. The 8565-121 was just under $6,000 United States dollars. Okay. And so the only difference between the submodels is the hard drive size. Now, to supplement the rather weak performance of the system of a 386SX system in the 1990 time frame, IBM put a Tribble SCSI controller inside. And I had thought that they put an XGA, not the XGA2, but the XGA1 in there to supplement the video. But it says in the announcement letter that it came with VGA graphics. And it came with a whopping 2 megabyte of memory. And we'll get into that in just a moment as well. So we learn the announcement date of the machine, and Tom has some real good links there as far as the diagram. We've got the ROM imaged, and it's got a link to a reference diskette. That's been an issue previously, if people remember me making a reference diskette, but I'll cover that in just a moment. Now and we'll have to see if that's, there's images above the diagram. There's the two cameras, and I'll have to see that. Yeah, that is from me. Those are my pictures. People can click on those if they'd like to. just to see from that page, to see the image of the planer. I'll bring the planer out and we'll take a look at it. And let's go through and of course, there's the component list. And we've got the system firmware imaged. And there's only one BIOS version for this, as far as I know. In fact, I'll bring that up independently on my screen here. Just to see. And all I'm trying to do here is a little bit of overview. So the ROM image is from the 8th of February, 1990. It's a revision 0. And it's interesting that the Model 55 LS, and that was still using the 386SX CPU, the desktop version. But LS stands for Land Station. It has a BIOS date of the same as the 65SX for that level of the Model 55SX. And so, and the Model 55 LS added some stuff where it took it to the level of the extended CMOS that the 65SX had. So it kind of brought the, I think the 55SX model to the level that IBM intended all along. And so that's the information on the 65SX. I'll go through and also, so, and letting people know, okay, I did cover the 65SX. It's been a while. It's probably been more than a year, probably closer to 2 years. I don't know if I've run the system information tool on it, but if I'll look after this segment, and if I haven't, I'll go through and do that at some point. I did go through. Let me bring up the planer, because I did have one complete 65SX that I don't know where I sourced it from back in the day. These are a little bit more uncommon. I mean, I would say for the 55SX being the most heavily produced PS2, the 65SX for the tower versions, for the between the tower and desktop, not the notebook versions and stuff like that. Some of the notebook versions of the PS2 weren't released necessarily a whole bunch in the US market. But I say the 65SX was one of the least produced PS2s. These are still rather uncommon. And that's in fact, of the 3 that were sitting there at Edgar Digital, I saw one was a Model 60. One was that, even though it was a Type 3 Model 80, I've got other Type 3 Model 80 systems. In fact, I've got, I think, 3 of the things around. So it was just like, do I really need those? And then I saw the 65SX, and I thought, well, let's go through, let's get at least that system. I talked to Roger, the proprietor, and we agreed on a price of all 3 for $125 USD. I knew that the systems were in rough condition. They'd been out in the weather. They were missing components. But this really is the reason that I went through and bought the 3 systems, knowing that the 65SX being a little bit more desired, because I can go through and I can market this. Even if I don't keep it, you know, I can go through and clean it up and it has a value. So here is the 65SX planer. Now, I took this out of the working model I had a couple years back, primarily because I actually had, and it's funny because I have, you can even see on video, I have a diskette in there, just like a scratch diskette, to underneath the drive cage to hold the top sim in place down, to latch the sims in place. And I wanted to swap out the planer. I like a visually complete planer, um, for a for show, for demonstration in a case like this that I can quickly kind of show. Now the picture that's on the Art and Tool site is the planer that's actually in the system. It has all the bodge wires. I didn't see if it has a ceramic RAM DAC or not. So this would be a later planer of the 65SX. Initial, I think they're all produced in the green color. I don't see the brown PCBs like IBM did with a lot of the planers of the PS2s, having the brown PCB in the initial productions and having the green planers in later release. And I'll go through and I can bring this up to the video. I want to show the full big glory of this, of how big it is. Ruler wise, I mean, I don't know if people can scale from me, but this is my standard 6-inch ruler that is here. So, you know, we're talking 6 plus 6 plus just under 4 inches. So, you know, we're talking 16 inches long or so, and we're talking just about 10 or 11 inches wide. And we've got the 8 slots. And they're 16-bit microchannel. Of course, slot number 6, because they're numbered from the bottom up. 1, 2, 3. And this is how the planer sits in this tower with the PSU at the top. You know, slot number 6 is the AVE bus connection, has that auxiliary video extension, or the 8514 slot, as that would be, because this has base video. It has base VGA on the planer, and this would be an auxiliary video board like the 8514, or if you had a base video board, it would be in any of the other slots because it doesn't fit in the slot for base video, and it just hang over that base video extension off of the end of that. And that was just such the thing that happened with the XGA2, seen in a slot. It would sit just and effectively, you know, even the 32-bit bus system that's keyed for a 16-bit bus to fit in a 16-bit bus slot. Now, we went over the SIM areas, and it's 2 SIM slots. It's up to 8 megabyte, you know, 4 megabyte parity modules in these sockets apiece. So you would have a total possible of 8 megabyte. We saw just a moment ago that the announcement letter says the systems came with 2 megabyte. In the 1990 time frame, these came with 2 megabyte of RAM and sold for close to or between $5,000 and $6,000 at the time. Inflation it would probably put those at least double the price. That price. I think I did the Model 80, and I tried to calculate out. It was $13,000, and the the inflationary increase over the number of years would have made it a $30,000 computer, as I remember. So we get to the CPU and the MPU slots. This is a little bit dusty, it looks like. At least I had an anti-static bag. And I've been running the swamp cooler, so it's relatively humid in here, not any. So we see with the CPU in the U72 position, the 386SX, 16 megahertz, and it's marked as a C-step CPU. And so the C-step would be able to take the so-called clip over upgrades. Now, that is, that's a hard way to upgrade these CPUs. I mean, the 386SX CPU was kind of a challenge to upgrade, as it were. And then next to it, we have the socket for the floating point processor, the FPU, and that would be a 387SX or a 387SL. And IBM Intel went through, and they reworked the core of the 387DX, and that was backfilled to the 387SL's floating point unit, but not the 387SX. So, and then of course the 387SL was the low power version, and so that's where the floating point coprocessor would go. The other areas, we have the VGA chip, of course, various support chips otherwise. There's the VRAM here in the center. This doesn't have planar memory otherwise for the system. It's purely on SIM sockets. The keyboard controller, the power connection, keyboard controller, because we have the keyboard, floppy drive controller, keyboard controller, floppy drive controller. And we can see a lot of what's known for at the top here, the dust being under the fan, this area being under the fan. So this area accumulates more dust on a planer typically in operation. When you go through and you dust it out, the system, you go through and you make sure, that you hit those areas, even sometimes like this, where the dust even has to be brushed to get it to loosen before it can go through. We have the EEPROMs, and of course, both of those images are dumped. They're interleaved ROM, and this has both the A BIOS and the C BIOS. The A BIOS being the advanced BIOS for operating systems like OS2, the C BIOS being for compatibility and with older BIOS versions, standard BIOS versions. And so these are interleaved for both the E and F segments. They would be 64K bits. Independently, they're interleaved to cover both of those 64 KB spaces of the E and the F segment. The really distinguishing factor among the 65SX is these. There is the Dallas module that is the DS1287. It's got the non-volatile RAM, real-time clock, as you can see, the symbol for the real-time clock. And this has to go through and, the in this day and age, it's got to be where these have run out battery wise, because this is the 22nd week of 1990. Okay. So we'll look at these, the fact of these modules in a moment on the system. Now, this is it's a Dallas DS1220AD, and this is 2 KB of non-volatile RAM, and that's for the extended CMOS. You know, the microchannel system has for the adapters, since it's got 8 microchannel slots, it has to have extended CMOS. And the 55SX, you know, did not have extended CMOS to it. Now, the later planar of the 55SX, including the 55LS, had a socket for this. So to make the model 55LS, IBM went through and finally populated that socket. You go through and you put this in place. Now, I don't have any of these modules modded. We'll get to looking at that aspect in just a moment here. I'm kind of taking it, or I'm hoping that you know, that the module I put in there will have enough charge, and I'll get to showing those in just a moment. But if these modules are missing, we get a halt code. I think it's 07 or 06 for the primary CMOS, the real-time clock, and 07 if it's the extended CMOS module that's missing. But that is, you know, the 65SX planar. We'll get to looking at what is in the system behind the drive cage here in a moment. I'll go through, I can get this back in the anti-static bag. And ultimately, I mean, I would have, even though that has broken SIM slots, I would have the ability to, if the planar would require it, I have a planar I can go through and I can put in to get the system operational. Why did I? Oh, okay. I didn't have that slot. I'm going to move this cover, because this is actually for the Model 80 that I had down here, because I do have the 65SX sealed right now. And I'm not saying anything new in chat. I'm just I'm thinking that everybody's enthralled with the way that I'm going through and discussing things. Now, I do have a spare power supply. Okay, and I think this is working. I think I went through and bench tested this even in prior weeks with like the Mul 60 planar, just to make, I mean, well, I may have not tested that, but I have the thought that it is operational. And we can see that this is the white switch on the 65SX. Now, I do have the complete system, even with the cover off down below me of my 65SX, that I know that I can, I mean, I've got memory that works on it. You know, the other aspects, and I've got memory set aside. I do have the parallel port postcode reader. I have out, just making sure that I'm what shows on screen. I have the postcard readers, the adapters, with the microchannel interposers, if I have to. And then this is actually going to come out on a future video of what this is. And this is an MC Mechanic that Tube Time US just sent me. I haven't even unboxed it. I'll probably do an unboxing video. So that is another microchannel postcode adapter that I have available. I'd like to do an unboxing for that. I do have a couple separate pieces I brought in that really are not going to get, you know, in a sense, used, an aspect of being used. But for the adapters I know that are in there, this is one of the dongles that goes through and breaks out the ports for one of the adapters I'll show in a moment. I do have a SCSI cable cord. This is not going to necessarily be connected. I do have the now these are unmodified. I had them out to kind of show the modifications I do on them. That going through and notching the side with the Dremel, exposing the two contacts, and then drilling on the negative side one, and this is undrilled, to sever that connection of the internal battery, and then putting a battery holder on top. And of course, this being an unmodified module. But primarily I have the just my little short little lead of my little go-to module that's been modified for the external battery. And I have an external battery right here. It's all good. I have my go-to diskette drive that that we'll look at and that I can go through and run, you know, the reference diskette or whatever the case may be from that. I do have, kind of getting over the software angle, I do have a 55SX, 65SX reference diskette. This is pre-made. I found that stored around, so I didn't have to generate one. And we'll go for an aspect of this here in a moment. And then I have a boot diskette of that IBM DOS 4.00 on hand. Yeah, we can get back to the modules a little bit. You know, being that we have the modules on board, even though we have that speaker pillar that we'll see once we get on the insides, it doesn't use, you know, the Panasonic batteries or that CR VR2 or whatever it is, these style batteries, because that battery is internal to the non-volatile RAM. So I have these Dallas 1220 chips, and it looks like 3 of them here and 2 of them here. These are even parts that I ordered back more than a year ago, wanting to work with the 55SX and take it to being extended CMOS on the planar. I haven't even unwrapped these, and I'm taking it. I mean, they have date codes. I'm taking that they don't look like they're rebadged or anything like that. You know, I have those should be fully authentic chips. Now I don't know the battery. And that's interesting for that, the 2013D. I don't know if that's talking about, I wouldn't think as much as 2020, but these I'm expecting to have more of a charge in the internal battery than the than the DS1287 real-time clock chip. And so we've got those handy. I do have some, I have some clips for the cables, probably not going to utilize those. I have some spare modules, the 4 megabyte modules I can go through and try. And if it comes down to it, I've got my 2 megabyte supply. And at least we need to have at least a little bit of RAM on the system. And this is all going from the case of me evaluating the system before. So what we're going to do, I'm going to make sure that the cover doesn't slip off. Okay, here is a close-up of the badge. Okay, IBM Personal System 2, Model 65SX. We can see the little boo-boo close up. We've seen that side, this black stuff. I think this will clean up fine. And even the stuff like I'm talking about at the bottom. And then, of course, the legs, the spin-out legs. Now, this has both legs at the bottom, the T-legs. Later on these cases, IBM went through the T-stand. They had this, they kept the forward one, but on these later cases, they went through and they took off the T-leg off the back, and they just had a bump on the bottom of the case, or a little bar in place of that, and just so you had the front leg. Now it's got a diskette drive. Let's look at the top, as I showed, white switch. And this is the 8565-121 submodel. So this would have, I think, would have came with a 120 megabyte SCSI hard drive. I had to look at the announcement letter again. And it's got the diskette drive. No telling whether that diskette drive works or not. The side cover, this on this side, it looks about as clean as between all the 3 models. This side is really clean. And the top is not too bad. Doesn't have the black goo on the top. Just says dust. And in particular, dust underneath the handle. That it's just a repository for dust in a lot of cases underneath that handle. I've seen handles for these broken with a really heavy. You get a couple full-size hard drives in there, and this thing's get heavy. And the back, okay. Okay, so here's the planar connections, really standard. Keyboard, mouse, the parallel that will connect up the post code reader, serial, and VGA. It looks like they have all the screws. Everything else is complete there. It has all the brackets in place where it doesn't have adapters. At the very top, it has a, what looks to be that IBM SCSI connector. We see a 37 pin below that. We see a blank for slot 6, which is the ABE bus, for like a auxiliary video extension for that adapter. We see what looks like a modem or a baseband adapter, and it's even got a label there with a little X. Okay. And then in slot 3, we see that 25 pin looks like a parallel port or Apple SCSI port related. We'll have to look here in a moment. There's the label, back of the power supply. Label on the back, type 8565. Okay, so going through, as I say, I've got my nickel ready here. And these are loose. This actually even popped off. Oh, I got black goo on pants. I didn't want to do that. Oh, well. These are almost more like a canvas sort of pants, too. In fact, what I can do is I go through and I'll look at what has shown up on chat or whatever. I didn't need that many. I want to go through. Yeah, the power switches. Hugh's making a comment about the power switches. I don't know how many minutes ago. As I've been going through and what's my 40, wow. So we hadn't even gotten to the system, and so what I'm doing is I'm going through and using the isopropyl alcohol, and I'm wanting to get as much of this out from me handling this case, and the alcohol will dry out. It'll evaporate. But I want to get this off of my pants relatively quickly. I don't want it to, and I'll have to see if that comes out in it could be where that comes out in the wash too. And just to kind of quickly spin, show what I'm talking about here. And this system has dust on it, but okay, here's the natured alcohol. And so that goes through, and it, it cuts. We see that it goes through, and it does kind of. I need to pull out the Clorox pads. I think go through, and also have a go through and take it out as well. So the possibility of going through and getting this cleaned up is very good. We'll go through. So, and I checked the lock. I had the lock of the Model 80 that worked real good. And it didn't, of course, work on this, but that's fine. And of course, it's got the two big things that you can loosen with the coin, the screws. And of course, if your case is locked, there's ways, on the page for the common items of the 6D, 65SX, and the 80 case, you can actually go through and pop the bottom of these off. Okay, so here we are, cover removed. Okay, now the foam, and this is the matched panel that came with the system. We see, just like the Model 80, the thin sections of foam are gone. The more complete sections are still there. Some are kind of they've got, and I don't want to get all this mess. In sections here, they're completely missing. But that nasty foam is kind of the worst. And there's pieces that have dropped for me as well. Get that out of the way. That out of the way. See, there's even pieces as I pulled the cover off that have fallen. We see, and that's in there tight. Normally, this is the bar for the T foot spinning out and locking into place. We see the speaker pillar that just has, two cords for the 2 wires for the speaker. No battery in the spot because that it doesn't use those. those that battery holder at all. Has none of the clips or anything else like that. We see, just like the other models on the horizontal surfaces, lots of dust, a lot of debris. The adapters in particular, lots of dust on them. I prefer not to run these adapters with that much dust on it because the dust can get conductive and give you issues. We have the hard drive carrier in the cage to adapt a 3.5-inch drive. These are very common with the 65SX. More common than, the Model 60 typically has full-size drives. The Model 80, the higher end models that had the SCSI drives, you saw these carriers on them. And then the 65SX, since it had the Tribble adapter added in as a SCSI adapter, you saw these carriers in place for those. And just like the other model that I have down below me that's complete, also has one of these carriers. And we'll get looking at how the drive is in there as well in a moment too. We got power cord down from the power supply. The power supply looks dusty. No telling of whether that works or not, but I have the replacement supply that we can try and work with. The foam here looks pretty good. IBM doesn't, in the later models, they went through and removed that back piece that had the spring clips and where their captive 40-pin edge connector that you just slid the diskette drive back in place and it locked in place. They put in the 34-pin drives, and the back of that diskette drive cage is gone. So it's just a 40-pin on the planar, and that's rerouted. I mean, it's got some wires changed and everything else. And it goes to 34-pin connectors. It's not a one-for-one arrangement. And if that diskette drive is bad, I've got that, my go-to drive. We see here, I'll have to show, it's hard to see. I don't know if we'll end up having to go zoomed in. It's a little bit too zoomed in. I don't want to adjust the camera at all. Okay. So it's not very evident from the view here. I don't really, but both of the Dallas modules are actually missing. And I knew this looking at the system when I went through and evaluated it at Edgar Digital. I saw that they were gone. The two, the SIM sockets are empty. It's got the EEPROMs on there. Yeah, that's real good lighting with the sunlight. You can see nothing in the SIM slots. So this machine was rated a little bit. Now, of course, the 386SX CPU is going to be there because, it's soldered onto the board. Okay, get zoomed out again. And so the planar otherwise looks pretty good because it's in that vertical position. All the horizontal surfaces here, the adapters, are, and it's got plant material in here, kind of like we saw with the other ones. Not really leaves, but it looks like even a pollen or a dust, plant dust from that. So as we go through, undo the power connection, spin these captive screws to release the hard drive carrier. There is foam bits that is on this lower section of the SCSI cable, internal SCSI cable. Okay. Okay. And this doesn't have a grounding clip. I do have other drive cages. This is not as badly rusted as what it was for the Model 60. The hard drive carrier, the metal hard drive carrier, looks in pretty good shape. The adapter on that horizontal surface, it's got some rust here. I didn't have my brush. I have my brush handy somewhere here. Here we go. Time to get it out. Okay. And then the hard drive itself is actually mounted in kind of like a reverse, ineffectively the top side down. And that's the same way it is for my complete Model 65SX. So the SCSI ID we can see is as typical in IBM systems. You want SCSI ID 6 on the hard drive, on the boot drive, the primary drive of the system. It's good to have that as SCSI ID 6 because the adapter, the SCSI adapter is SCSI ID 7. And IBM SCSI is a different convention. Higher numbered SCSI ID has higher priority. Higher numbered microchannel slots has priority. So the slot 8 that's at the top of the case is typically the hard drive controller. And we saw that on the 60, excuse me, on the Model 80, the AXX model that we looked at from Edgar Digital, the Tribble, and the Tribble is, I was corrected by Major Tom, the Tribble is actually a 16-bit SCSI interface, even though it has a 32-bit bus section. We'll pull it out in a moment here. But yeah, this is the 8565-121 submodel. So that's a 120 megabyte SCSI drive. And this drive looks in really good shape. There's the little filter for the insides, just the pressure equalizer, SCSI cabling. And these little hard drive carriers have a clip on there to hold the SCSI cable. So you see even this is positioned where you have, for this P3 connector, you can have a second drive in there, 3.5 inch, real easily. You've got 2 power leads there. And the primary drive, SCSI, is always at the end of the chain. And we can see these flaps here, these white flaps. Those are the terminating resistor packs that are down inside there. So this is properly terminated as well. And this is most likely going to be the original drive of the system. Okay. As I say, it's got some foam around on it. Okay. So we set that aside. Underneath, we do see bodge wires on the planer. And everything, the EEPROM, everything else looks to be the same known version of the BIOS. Okay. So we get through, and you want to make sure that these thumb screws on back are loosened for going through. If they're not loose, You go through and use your coin. I don't know what, and of course they're going to be different in different countries. I don't know what coins people use outside the US. And we're just going to loosen. Some of these were already previously loose. I don't think it's been disturbed necessarily. But we're going to go through, we're going to pull the tribble. Now, I went through, I don't think I pulled this tribble. And very dusty, but I look for, I may have gone through and swiped the, and that's got the 64. So I looked at the microcode. I like to see what, you know, what the adapter has on it. And I have a spare tribble, you know, at hand in the working system. This looks like where it's got some bodge wires and things like that. This looks like to be an early tribble version. And I mean, we'll have to see how that cleans up under the brush. But normally I would not run these things being so dirty. Because, you know, you can get, and you don't want to build up a static charge with your brush and brushing these. This will do it as well. The dust dries out the air around the brush, and there's a static that can originate from your brush as you do this. Just so we don't have to pop the other adapter out, this is actually cleaning up relatively good. It's getting down to a level of dust that I'm not as worried about. The external connector looks real good. That proprietary IBM SCSI connector. And I do have the SCSI cable for that. And I don't know why there's some sections that are just, that's really odd, that section, that center. And it's just, I guess, the traces make it look more like it's dust free. Yeah, that's actually cleaning up pretty good. There's not much goo. It's just, it looks like a little bit of dust that I can get off with a brush mainly. And as I say, the tribble has a 32-bit connector, but Major Tom says it really doesn't use the 32-bit section. This is effectively a 16-bit adapter, but it's got, you know, some traces from that 32-bit section. Power, I don't know, or whatever. So we'll go through and reuse. And I don't have any suspicions that the drive doesn't work. In fact, I want to go through and try from the drive. So the next board down, and this is in slot 7. This has the 37-pin connector. And I recognize this right off the bat, too. We'll go through and clean it up. And I'm surprised that this one chip is socketed. Okay. So yeah, it's marked as an 82C40 452, and that is 2 serial ports, 1 parallel port on the chip for that chip that's socketed, and this is the non-UART versions. This effectively has the 16C450 UARTs, 2 of them that are in there. The 552 has the 16-byte FIFO. Now, this is not going to be on the reference diskette as a default, but I do have my other system here with the diskette USB diskette drive that I can go through and I can get the file, the ADF over to the diskette. And for this one, it cleans up pretty good too. Seeing how there may be an operating system that I don't know on here, I may want to have this restored to using all the adapters that are on here. And I'll have to find ADFs if I'm going to go through and to use them. Let's even go through and clean up a little bit. Otherwise, okay. Next down, it's got that connector with the two RJ11s. This is really dusty. Wow. And by the way, I've left on the swamp cooler too for keeping it a little bit cool. Here, when I came in the other day, I smelled an like electronic smoke. Some component somewhere here got hot during the day, and I don't know which component it was, what device around. I think it may have been the my UPS, my uninterruptible power supply, which has steel lead acid batteries in it, so that's a little bit of a concern. I hope it wasn't anything like my my AS400 here. And so this and the dust in areas, but this is a modem, practical peripherals. And I don't know the speed, whether it's 2400 VPS. And again, I hope to get these. I'll have to get the ADF, but maybe I can get all these adapters clean enough that I can go through and still have them on the system and configured. And that's gonna, who knows? This is gonna take. This is gonna be a 2-hour stream or more. And there's the UART, the 16C450. As I say on that Boca card, it's effectively got 2 of those UARTs built into that chip. Yeah, I keep going and dust keeps coming off of this thing. Okay. And we're keeping a good idea of where these components go. All the back brackets were filled in. Okay. And the last board, and this had that 25 pin connector on the back. But this looks like a some sort of analog to digital. Okay, it's got a microchannel interface chip. And I don't know if it's more liquid on the modem. It's very it had kind of this dust. It acts like it's had moisture in it, even though it cleaned off. It's the same effective position as on the modem. And of course, we'll need to identify, and I'll show there's one way we can go through and identify these cards through ROM Basic if we have to. I'll have to pull up that listing though. Okay. So microchannel interface chip, chips and technology, 82C 612. Microchannel interface. And that was just a chip that made it easier to develop microchannel boards, all the POS registers and things like that. Identifying, I would have to look through. To see. Okay, Mountain Computer. Okay. So Mountain Computer, I may have to get a an adapter ID for what this is. But that's also cleaning up the dust. It's kind of caked on right there with moisture. I know that we've got to be past an hour of live stream at this point. Okay, a little bit of shaving foam. Okay. Yeah, and I know that shaving foam is soap. Okay. So those look good enough probably to go through and to have in place. Okay. And we'll get putting the tribble back here in a moment. Now, I don't know what RAM this had in there. We'll get to the point where we finally open our Dallas modules. I'll have to look at the date codes on these compared to the other, the 3-pack one. And my hands are got dusty from all that too. Okay. Okay. Got it loose and then both of them came out. So these are the So 1997 for the 46th week. And the 21st week of 1997. And I don't know, these are probably polls, but they might be new old stock. And on these modules, it was typical that they had a electrical fusible link that the first time use, the first time power up when it's put in the circuit, goes through and trips that fusible link to start the battery. So if you have these dual slot and the shelf life is good, they should be workable. And you can even see the chip. So effectively, that's just the internal battery on top in that hermetically sealed. And there is your Dallas chip, a DS1210. So, and I don't want to go through with acetone and check to see, you know, if these were, and maybe that has two of them inside there for that capacity. I have no idea. And then let's look at the date. So and that I don't suspect that would, I don't think that would be 2020. I think I'd be just 2000, because these other ones have the 97 dates. 2013. And see, it's interesting that those don't have the chip in the potting. Real shiny. These are probably new old stock as well. So I'm thinking, even though I opened up the other two, I'm thinking that the later date code on that, I'm wanting to do that one a little bit more. So we have the Dallas. And these pins are a little bit tweaked, so that's probably a pull. I want to get my glasses on. Yeah, I'm just keeping track of the chat, because I don't know how. In fact, I need to check on my. Somebody would have told me if my audio levels were bad. Okay. Okay, the DS1287 module. Let's get talking. On the systems that use these, the PS2 Model 30 286, Model 25 286, the 55SX, and the 65SX. When you initially power these on, and there's some things about clearing CMOS and things like that to get them to work and so like that, leave the battery out. Just have the module in place as you go through and you start it, and it complains about the battery. That's the point where you pop in the battery. And you don't have to worry about clearing CMOS or anything else, because having the battery out, I think that's from an earlier time frame with the internal battery that you had to clear the CMOS. You don't have to be as worried about clearing the CMOS with a modified. So we'll get that. We've got both modules in place. We will go through, and I think I'm going to try, and I could go through and I could do the And this is really weird with the, the drive cage is just right over the top. Um, makes it kind of a challenge. I mean, I could pull that drive cage out of there too. And in particular, in fact, I want to try the 4 megabyte initially. I don't know what operating system is on that hard drive, but I don't want to have it to where being like a failed module or something it complains about. And I got it in that other, if I have it in that other, so notch down. I'm just trying this, and I could go through and I could pull the modules off of my. Okay, so this is the clips in place, and these things are delicate though. Be careful as you put them in. Now, this should be. I guess the other slot is filled first. I should have studied that a little bit more of what bank, and that's a 70 nanosecond, so I don't know if that one will complain. These are 70 nanosecond. I know that this module here is an 80 nanosecond. Well, we'll see if it complains. Then I know to switch it. And it's almost like, do I want to? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the hard drive down here. I'm going to have it out of the cage. And of course, the SCSI connector is keyed. Got that in there, right? It goes up. Well, that's the dusty side. So that dusty side was up. Okay. I thought it would be the other way to where the cable would be routed up immediately, but I guess I'm thinking of the MFM and ESDI drives. So we've got everything there. We don't have a battery in the CMOS RAM. Now I'm going to go through. I'm going to do the parallel port postcode reader right off the bat. And we go into our mouse port for power. Later on, based on what I find, I can go through and modify that if I need to. I don't know how that'll show up with the lighting. Our video capture. keyboard, and lastly, our power. And as I said, okay, actually get the correct keyboard cable. This is the keyboard cable. The other was the mouse I have standing by that is not used. Okay. So everything goes in connection-wise pretty good. There's not any broken off bits or anything else in there. Now, for the first boot, I'm going to go through and not have anything in there for the reference diskette. Method to my madness. Okay. Okay. Nothing from the power supply. Okay. And remember the switch contacts. And I pulled the connection, of course. But remember, these switch contacts can go bad. They can get dirty. That's what happened with the Model 60. Okay, heard something energized in there a little bit. There we go. Fans going. Okay, and we have it halted on 0, 1. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is trying to get myself back on screen here. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised if that is memory. Although and keep in mind there's a keyboard fuse as well. Okay. Okay, so there's also dust on the upper sides of these chips on the planer. And there is dust in particular above that 386SX really bad. Now a 0, 1 could be a BIOS code, meaning that there's bit rot in the BIOS. Let's go through and let's pop in the battery. I want to get working. Okay. And it should give a 225 error if the RAM is wrong. And I may want to go through. In fact, let's do this. rather than the 4 megabyte modules that I know, or I have, I don't know that will be recognized for the system. Let's go with two 2 megabyte modules. Again, if I have to pull the cage, I will, the drive cage. Yeah, and these, just be careful, these plastic retaining clips. I may have to have something like a diskette in there, just like I did with my other system, to hold. Wow. Okay, let's take another look. Still that 01. And that, I'm wondering if that's a CPU or a BIOS checksum. We do have the ability there's my screwdriver if I need to remove the cage. And let's pull power before we get monkeying around with things too much. Okay. And I recognize that people have places to go, things like that. The later part of this can always be caught in replay. I don't see the chat very active, or didn't before when I looked. Okay. So we're going to go through, just because I can, and this is one of the reasons I didn't want the hard drive in there. Okay, let's go through. And because it's been over an hour and a half of the stream so far. Okay, so we're going to go through. I'll get myself off screen there. We will go back to the camcorder view. And we're going to get the drive carrier out of there for now. Okay. Okay. So we're going to go through and now we can reseat the BIOS. I can also swap it out if we don't get any reaction. Okay. Just making sure we're pin 1 or pin 1 orientation. And 0, 1, I would think would be the BIOS checksum. Just because if it's the CPU being bad, you'll never see any postcode at all. Okay. And that's why the parallel port postcode reader, and maybe I need to pull out a microchannel postcode reader. Okay. So we've got and pin 1 in the lower right hand corner, as it were. How did, okay, strung up on top here. I was going to say, how did my power cord disappear? Okay, no change. Okay. Okay, that seats that sim a little bit better. And these sims should be recognized. Okay. So, and of course, like I say, the CPU is soldered, and there can be pins that are together, or something around that area is dinged up, something, and CPUs can go bad on their own. Okay. And we're going to do these one at a time. I'm going to do the odd. Excuse me, I'm going to do the even. And technician, you're swapping parts one at a time. Okay. Okay. So we swapped the even. The other thing you want to do is you want to reduce, adapters and things like that is another option that we can maybe start looking at. Okay, no effective change. Still a 0, 1 as far as the current halt code. So we will go through. At least we're getting the power supply to kick over every time now. Now, and I don't think it'll do with the low value of the, and of course 01 being the first postcode that it does. That I don't think it's anything like the non-volatile RAM modules or anything like that. But on PS2s, the parallel port postcode reader, for being ultimately $10 USD in most instances around the world, it's a good thing to have around. I'm going to dust off a little bit of this, because one thing I see, if I don't get a reaction off of these BIOS swaps, this stream may go through to the point of actually where I bench test. And as I say, normally if memory is bad, you'll get the postcode reader will advance to that section and you'll get a 225. You know, it goes through a video initialization and it'll show something on the screen. Okay, so power cord's back in. No change. So I really get to suspect the CPU at this point. Everything being equal. I'm glad the power supply is going through and turning over. We will go through. And I want to remember positions. You know, it's Boca card in 7, practical peripherals in 5, and this mountain card in slot 3. Okay. So we've gone through, we've reduced a lot of the aspects here. I'm going to go through it. I'll check when I bench. Okay. Let's go through. Let's set this to 680. Oh, it's still set to 680. Get an interposer. Okay, so these two LEDs are strobing. There are other LEDs, and it's not turning over any on the. So the oscillator, IO write and IO read is going. Oscillator is not, and the memory L is not. Voltages looked. Okay, so negative 5 volt, but microchannel doesn't use negative 5 volt. Doesn't have it on the bus. I'm looking at, the power LEDs, and it's really hard to tell in the lighting here. There's just so much light, but I have the positive 5 lit, negative 5 is out, which is fine. Negative 12 is lit, positive 12 is lit. As far as I feel in this instance, the there's the correct voltages there. And I'm seeing for the oscillator not going at all. Okay. And then this for the clock, it is strobing. And so I'm going to do one last little kind of cold check. If I knew where I... Okay. Okay, no effective change. Okay. So this stream is going to take another direction that I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bench the other planer that I have. Just because I think this, there's something to this planer that is not functional. Okay. So I think for the amount of time that I've gone through, yeah, it's good that the power supply didn't pop. And trying to get myself back up on the screen. Okay. So power supply didn't pop, but the planer is not going. I'm not seeing any reaction otherwise. So I think I'm going to go through and I'm going to bench the other power supply and planer. We'll set this main unit aside for now. And I will go through and just to see what signals show up. And if so, the other planer is going in, and we will progress from there. So yeah, but these planers have been in good condition otherwise. They're vertical in the case. There's not much dust. Otherwise, this did have a little bit of dust on the top of the 386SX. I mean, I could test for warmth too. That it could be possible that there's just not any code at all that's coming out. I could be mistaking. It's got FF in the on the one side and 0, 1, but that just could be just it's latching. Okay. So 72 degrees on the CPU. 73.6, 73.2. So it's around 72, 73 is the ambient temperature, Fahrenheit. Okay. So that the CPU is warming up, going to about 75, 77, 78 degrees. So it is going a little bit warm to the touch. Okay. So, but by everything I know, it doesn't look like it's that it's continuing on here. So yeah, I'm going to go through and well, and so the Dallas modules, I can go through and I can check those on this other planer that I know works. I think I'm going to go through and I'm gonna close down the stream. I'll do a live stream later on today. After we do a break for like lunch, and maybe in a couple hours I'll come back and we will readdress things from there to see if a bench planer, see what we get for the baseline from that other planer. And I have no problem with a planer swap. As I say, this planer that I have spare, and there's a reason I have spare planers and spare parts, because things like this happen. I have no problem swapping the planer back in. I'm thinking a couple hours. And I realize in some places that gets a little bit later for some people. It's going into the evening hours in some cases. But I just feel if we've gone 2 hours, I'm at this point, especially for me being hungry and everything else, I don't want to continue on just with a super long stream. I'll give the headset a little bit of time to charge. This does last a few hours, but it'll have some charge time, and we'll come back to that. There's not really any way of me pausing the stream. I'll just go through and go live again in a little bit more than 2 hours. Okay. And then, so that would be 7 p.m. for your time, Hugh. We're looking at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which I'm on. That makes it 4 p.m. for Eastern, 3 p.m. for the Central Time Zone, and makes it 1 p.m. for the California Time Zone. So I think that'll be functional enough for everyone. And we can continue on from there with the bench power supply. I'll have cardboard there. We'll go through and bench and get a baseline. I have no problem putting a different planer in there because the main view is we want to see what's on that hard drive, right? We want to see, what that may have it since it looks like the original hard drive. And so I thank everybody for tuning in, and we will see everyone here in a couple of hours when I go live again. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.